Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I'm going to be discussing an integrative approach to psychotherapy, a case study, which focuses on Miss B, who is the client. So we are going to jump right in. So I kind of observed three main points. My first point is that power ties into control. That was kind of one of the author's observations throughout this entire process of her meetings with Miss B, as well as how healing is an expression of God's Spirit within the client, and it doesn't act upon the person. And my last point that I observed is that because of spiritual healing that was found in Miss B throughout their therapy sessions, she was able to lament with the guidance of the therapist, and it allowed her to find hope that God was going to guide her through her major depressive disorder, and allowed to find light in her life and amidst the darkness that she was experiencing throughout her entire life. So to provide further context, I'm just going to provide a few points that I observed from Miss B, and that is that she interprets aggression as a form of power, and that power is linked to men. Miss B grew up with an abandoned biological father, and she had a very poor relationship with her stepfather, in which he was very abusive. She also had relationship problems where she would show romantic interest in other men, and they just wouldn't reciprocate those feelings. And she had a tendency of falling for the same guy or the same type, and it kind of made her feel hopeless regarding her love life. And to add on to that, she finds trouble experiencing vulnerability, which we'll discuss more about, but it's very easy for her to express anger, and I think it's because of her experiences of aggression that made it very easy for her to express that. She also believes that God is distant and unwilling to aid her, even though she had a very poor relationship with men. She was never mad at God involving the occurrences that happened in her life, but she still felt like she had a void within her, and that God was very distant during that, in which she felt really lonely and isolated and felt like he wasn't really there, and she was having trouble finding God's presence throughout this difficult process of her major depressive disorder. And then towards the end of this article, the therapist reminds God that he is inside of Miss B, and without her knowing that, it made her feel safe. And I feel like safety is one of Miss B's core values, and she desires that more than anything. It's just feelings of safetyness, and that is reflected from her childhood as well, which we will also discuss about that. Okay, so my favorite point that I observed is that anger made Miss B feel powerful, and sadness made her feel weak. Anger is protective, while sadness is vulnerable. I feel like this quote is it's not really a quote, but my favorite point, it's very relatable. And anger can be a form of a defense mechanism, and we can see that through Miss B's childhood, where she experiences a lot of bad occurrences that happened in her life, and it shaped her to be this very angry, defensive person, because she ties aggression to men. And because she ties aggression to men, she kind of looks up to that, and that's kind of what she grew up with, and that's what she knows, and that's how she openly expresses anger, is through her experiences with men. And it kind of ties into that gender stereotype of men. They tend to be more angry, and it's powerful, and then they think sadness is vulnerable. And Miss B has the same thoughts as well, and it definitely has to do with her experiences while growing up that made her think this way. Do I agree with the author's perspective? Ultimately, I do agree with the author's perspective in this article. The way that she handled this entire situation was really admirable, and I felt like I was there present in the therapy session and learning about Miss B and her struggles, and it was just amazing how The article displays Miss B at square one to how she is now, and that entire transformation is really moving. However, there is like one quote that I saw in the beginning of the article in which the author states that those who rely on God as the being of control in their life circumstances are more likely to have poor wellness. And she's more tying towards like those with illness and how they struggle to find healing. And I feel like that quote was really broad, because I feel like we can use, like control is kind of not a term that I would like to use, but we can see God as a form of guidance. And if we if we accept that guidance, it will allow us to if we allow God's presence to fill within us, it will allow us to go through these circumstances or these difficult times in our life and persevere through them and learn from them ultimately. And it doesn't allow us to have poor wellness, which I don't agree with. It will allow us to grow in spiritual healing, even though the author just says healing, and it's not specific. It doesn't mention like physical healing or spiritual healing. I have a tendency to disagree with that, because even people with chronic illnesses still have faith in God. And even though their condition may seem hopeless, they still do have hope in God, and they're not mad at God, which is it's incredible, and it's really admirable. How does this information relate to your own experiences or beliefs? So on page 4, it says that Miss B's safety was only possible when she was in power. Miss B's leadership role is a position of power that also appears to have a protective function. So I personally relate to this because growing up as an only child, I feel like I had the privilege to kind of do whatever I wanted to. Therefore, I tend to be like, I want to do this. I'm very much a me talker, but I'm also a very cautious person. I don't like to put myself in dangerous situations. Like, for example, I'm not really a partier. Well, I hope like no one is, but like going to like an SDSU frat party, for example, that idea just terrifies me. Therefore, like if I'm very open about my decisions, like very open about my choices, and I'm just honest if I feel uncomfortable about a certain situation. And it's a form of a protective function. And for Miss B, the reason why she wanted to be in power in her church is because it's fear-derived. And I would agree that for myself as well. Like, the reason why I don't put myself in certain situations is because I am scared of the outcome. And I feel like with her childhood and the trauma that she experienced growing up, it's validating. Like, it's her fear is valid. And because she wants to be empowered, it feels like the only safeness that she can find. And because she doesn't have a good relationship with God because she thinks he's distant, I can see that how that can be her only safe, like her safe space, if that makes sense. So what question would you pose for the discussion and the reading? This is a very opinionated question and very subjective. There's no right answer because it ties to your own experience. But what in your daily life makes it difficult for you to be reminded of God's presence? And what do you do in your lives to enhance your relationship with God in order to feel his presence? I feel like these questions are really important because it discusses in Miss B's journey of how she implemented spiritual practice to find God's presence. But I mean, there's many things that you could do to find God's presence in daily life and just be reminded that God is always with you. So I can't wait to discuss this reading more in class with you guys, and I'll see you guys on Monday. Bye.